What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are pulling the rear shock out of the KTM. We're going to swap over springs. I did order right up here. I ordered the correct shock spring for my weight. Since I'm a big fatty, the suspension on this bike is way too soft for me. You will see you'll see a video where I was riding this thing. In fact, let me back up for a minute. On my social media, I posted a video not so long ago where I was having a hard time on bigger jumps. I love the suspension everywhere, but on the bigger jumps, it just landed so hard. And I was running about 140 PSI in these front forks. And I have since learned that is way too low for my weight. I'm like between 220 and 230. I fluctuate a lot. So that is way too soft. Same with the shock spring. So we're going to swap that out. We're going to try 170 PSI and see if that fixes it. Other than that, I absolutely love this 450. So yeah, let's get to pulling the rear shock. Now there's a bunch of ways you can go about this. I've seen people pull the swing arm bolt or pivot bolt and kind of move the swing arm aside to get it off that way. I've seen people pull the subframe and the exhaust. But I have a buddy who's had many of these 450s. And he says you can do it by removing the exhaust and the front bolt and the wishbone, and then remove the mud flap. So we're going to try that. Sounds a little easier, and see if we can get this shock out of there. So let's get to it. Okay, we're going to start with the muffler. There is a bolt right here that we're going to remove. Second one right here. Not sure if you guys can hear that. My 5-year-old daughter in the swimming pool going crazy. Okay. And then we got one more bolt up here in the clamp. Oh, you know what? Nope, we don't need that one. It's just the exhaust spring. And it looks like there's one spring and that can come off. So let me get that. It is hot and muggy today, but muffler's pulled. 2 bolts and a spring. Muffler's off. Let's get the mud flap off. Okay, mud flap is only 2 bolts, here and here. Okay, 2 bolts off. This is free. Those of you that don't know, white is not stock on the 22s. It's black. Just the white just is such a clean look. I had to order the white one. Okay. Next up is this little chain guide here. We need to remove this so we got good access to the wishbone there. Just a 10mm. You can pull that off. Okay, 17mm. On this front wishbone. So that comes out. Get that off. Now I won't be able to do this with one hand, but I'll have to push that bolt out and then I should be able to pivot this enough. Obviously I'm gonna have to loosen up the bottom of the shock and top of the shock. And then from there, we should be able to wiggle this out with a little pressure on the swing arm. So let's get to it. All right, this is definitely tricky to do with one. Shock is out. Just had to finagle it a lot. I probably should have pulled the skid plate too. The back of the skid plate was kind of rubbing on the spring or the bottom of the shock as well, which made it kind of tricky, but it is out. I don't know if that was the easiest way. Unless you know the exact position you got to put this thing in to slide it in and out. But now we can swap shock springs and get it back together. Next thing is we have to release these. There was a little Allen key here to loosen that up, and then you use a punch and a hammer and and back this slowly off. Once this is off, you can move the retainers. Shock spring can slide off, and we put the new one on. So on this end, if I can get it, there is a small clip here, right here, that we need to remove, and then this should be able to come off. Okay, so I just used a little pick, pull that clip off. There. There. There we go. Old spring off. New spring is blue, which is kind of cool. Okay. Put everything on the same way it came off. Okay. Now, loosen it up, tighten this bad boy up. Okay, new shock spring is on. Now let's just get it back in the bike. Okay, shock spring has been swapped. Got the collar just kind of snug because obviously we need to set sag. 1,000 times easier getting the shock in than it was getting it out. And what was really screwing me up is I have this a Cherubies or a Cerbis, however you want to call it, skid plate, and it's got this little linkage cover. So I highly recommend, if you have a skid plate that comes back like this, take it off before you do it. Just that was catching on the coils of the spring. It was making it a real bear to get out. I was able to do it, or if you have a second pair of hands, somebody that can just kind of hold that down if it's a plastic one to get it out. But overall, doing it this way to get the rear shock out was pretty easy. So now we're just going to bolt it back together in the exact same order it came out. We've already got the bolts started on the shock, which are all 60 foot-pounds of torque. Same with the linkage, which I can't get a socket in there. So we'll have to just do our best with a 17mm wrench. But it is all 60 foot-pounds of torque. And yeah, let's get it back together. And I can't wait to get to the track and try this thing out with suspension that is set for my weight. Okay, 60 foot-pounds of torque on the shock bolts, which I just did this one, which it is good. The bottom is the same. All right, now we get the wishbone bolt back in, which is definitely tricky with only one set of hands. It's the cotter pin on the foot peg that's giving me a hard time. That's in the way. There. Okay. So this is the 17mm nut, which is also 60 pounds of torque, but I cannot get a socket in there. So we are going to do our best. Just try to go with the same amount of pressure it took to get it off. And I did have to put a decent amount on it, so. Okay. So at this point, shock and linkage is back together. Now it's the mud flap and exhaust. We don't want to forget the little chain guide back on this side. Okay. And there you have it, guys. It is back together. We got the shock spring in for my correct weight. Again, I'm like 220, 230 in between there with goals to lose a couple pounds. So it still should be good for a while. And then I wouldn't mind it a little stiff if I lost a little more weight. And then, yeah, we're going to try 170 PSI up front, but this should definitely make a big difference out in the track, so I can't wait to try it. So hope you guys like this. Hopefully you learned something. This was my first time pulling the shock out, and talked to some KTM buddies that said, don't pull the swing arm, don't pull the subframe, do it this way. It actually worked out really good. My only recommendation, of course my buddy just didn't know that I was running this style skid plate, would be to pull that plate or just have someone there to be able to kind of hold that bottom piece out of the way. Putting it back in was 1,000 times easier. So just because I was pushing down through it instead of trying to pull it up and it getting caught. So awesome. So thanks for sticking along, and we'll see you guys in the next video.